Before we had smartphones, social media, and endless scrolling, there was one place where everything happened: the shopping mall. It wasn't just where you went to buy things, it was where you went to feel alive. Malls in the 80s and 90s were places of neon light, food court drama, cassette racks, and awkward flirting by the fountain. And Hollywood knew it. There was something cinematic about escalators, mannequins, and midnight mall chases. Something so perfectly now back then, that today, it feels like a lost world. So today, we're walking through 10 movies that didn't just feature malls. They lived in them. Stories set in food courts and fashion aisles. Romantic meet-cutes by the perfume counter. And sometimes, robotic traps under fluorescent light. These are the mall movies that captured the feeling of a generation. In 1986, horror took a stroll through the food court and found something new: killer robots with laser eyes. Chopping Mall is one of those rare movies where the entire plot happens inside a shopping mall. And not just any mall, but the kind that only existed in the 80s. Neon lights, chrome escalators, pastel food courts, and storefronts glowing under cold fluorescent lights. The story begins with Park Plaza Mall unveiling its newest innovation in security: a team of robotic guards designed to patrol the building after hours. They're boxy, awkward-looking machines with extendable claws, calm robot voices, and, inexplicably, lethal weaponry. Of course, lightning strikes the mall, because 80s, the programming goes haywire, and soon the bots are hunting down a group of teenagers who decided to have a late-night party inside one of the stores. The tone walks a fine line between campy fun and low-budget dread, and it works. You get synth-heavy music, explosions, over-the-top laser deaths, and dialogue that could only have been written during the Reagan years. But what makes Chopping Mall so special isn't just the absurd premise. It's how perfectly it captures the feel of an American mall in the mid-80s. The empty corridors, the shuttered shops, the glowing signs for stores that don't exist anymore. It's both a time capsule and a love letter to a place that once defined American teenage life. And ironically, for a film about robotic mall cops murdering teenagers, it's one of the most vivid cinematic portraits of what malls used to feel like. A mix of excitement, excess, artificial perfection, and something slightly eerie, just under the surface. Chopping Mall may not have made a huge splash when it first came out, but it's grown into a cult classic, especially for fans of VHS-era horror. Because if you were a teenager in the 80s, there's a good chance you didn't just hang out at the mall. You imagined what might happen if the lights went out and the doors locked behind you. This film took that thought and gave it lasers.
If Chopping Mall showed us what could go horribly wrong at the mall, Mallrats showed us what happened there every single day, especially in the 90s. Released in 1995, Kevin Smith's Mallrats is not just a comedy about slackers. It's a cultural time capsule of a generation that lived between the comic book store and the pretzel stand. The plot? Two best friends, T.S. and Brody, get dumped by their girlfriends and do what every heartbroken teenager in the 90s would do: they go to the mall. But this isn't just a place to walk around aimlessly. The mall in Mallrats is the universe. It's where exes are confronted, where a dating game show is being filmed in the food court, where security guards are cartoonishly aggressive, and where a man spends the entire movie trying to see a hidden image in a magic eye poster. The film doesn't just happen at the mall. It breathes the mall. You get comic shops with racks of bagged issues, CD stores blasting grunge, mall cops on Segway prototypes, and background extras dressed in fashions that scream 17 magazine, spring '95. And in the middle of all that, you've got Brody, played by Jason Lee, delivering monologues about Batman's anatomy, breakfast cereal mascots, and why shopping malls are the last safe space for the disillusioned youth. What makes Mallrats special isn't just the jokes, though there are plenty. It's the way it captures the psychology of the mall kid. The mall isn't just a setting. It's therapy. It's routine. It's rebellion. Kevin Smith understood that for Gen X, the mall was the only place where you could sort of be an adult, without really having to be one. Add to that the now iconic cameo from Stan Lee, who gives romantic advice no less, and you've got a film that's both a comedy and a sincere ode to pop culture, consumer spaces, and the weird rituals of growing up. Mallrats wasn't a hit when it came out. In fact, it bombed. But like a good comic tucked behind the counter, it became a cult classic. One that could only exist in a time when malls were our stages, our sanctuaries, and our second homes.
Not every mall movie needs killer robots or comic book debates. Some are about the quiet moments. When the escalators stop moving, the lights dim, and the mannequins seem to be listening. That's the space Career Opportunities lives in. Written by John Hughes, the same mind behind The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the film trades the noisy teen crowds for something more introspective. Jim Dodge, played by Frank Whaley, is a fast-talking slacker who lands a graveyard shift job as a night custodian at a big-box department store. A Target, in fact. On his first night, he discovers he's not alone. Josie McClellan, the local rich girl played by Jennifer Connelly, has hidden inside the store to escape her controlling father. What unfolds is less a traditional rom-com and more of a midnight fairy tale, set not in a castle, but in a fluorescent-lit wonderland of electronics aisles, toy sections, and empty checkout counters. The shopping mall here isn't a place of noise and crowds, it's a blank canvas. As the characters skateboard through aisles, try on ridiculous outfits, ride coin-operated horses, and open up about their lives, the store becomes a kind of surreal playground where real connection is finally possible. And of course, there's that scene, Jennifer Connelly, in slow motion, gliding back and forth on a mechanical horse in the store's arcade section. It's one of the most oddly memorable moments of early 90s cinema, a visual that somehow sums up the dreamy loneliness of that era's mall life. Career Opportunities isn't as loud as the other mall movies, but that's exactly what makes it work. It reminds us that malls weren't just social zones. They were places of possibility, especially when they were empty. At night, under that artificial glow, anything could happen. And for one night, it does. Fast Times at Ridgemont High isn't just a teen movie. It's a social record of what adolescence looked and felt like in the early 80s. And nowhere is that more obvious than in its depiction of the shopping mall. At a time when malls were becoming the new town square, Fast Times positioned them as the nerve center of teenage life. And not in an exaggerated, over-the-top way. In a way that actually felt real. The Ridgemont Mall in the film is a complete ecosystem. Food court jobs, awkward first dates, passive-aggressive run-ins with exes, and that daily ritual of walking in slow circles, hoping something would happen. Characters like Stacy, Linda, and Brad don't just pass through the mall. They live there in a way anyone who grew up in the 80s remembers. Brad works fast food in a pirate hat. Linda gives love advice in front of a sunglasses kiosk. Mark hangs around the record store trying to work up the courage to flirt. And all of it happens under the harsh glow of overhead lights, surrounded by indoor plants, brown tile, and that generic soft jazz music playing faintly in the background. There's no big mall plot twist here. No killer robots. No wild chase scenes. Just everyday teenage life. Trying, failing, dreaming. All centered around a place that felt like freedom with a food court. And that's why the mall in Fast Times hit so hard. It's not dramatized, and it's documented. If you ever worked at Orange Julius, folded shirts at the Gap, or killed time at Spencer's without buying anything, this movie gets you. It doesn't treat the mall as a punchline to choose. It treats it as a fact of life. And in doing that, Fast Times at Ridgemont High accidentally became one of the most authentic mall movies ever made. Mannequin is one of those movies where, if you describe the plot out loud, it sounds completely ridiculous. A young window dresser in a department store falls in love with a mannequin, who turns out to be a cursed Egyptian princess that only comes to life when no one else is looking. That's the premise. And yet, somehow, it works. Mostly because the movie embraces its own weirdness with charm and a full commitment to 80s fantasy logic. But just as important as the love story is the setting. Prince & Company, the fictional department store in the heart of a mall that might as well be a palace of retail dreams. Giant escalators, shiny tiled floors, neon lighting, fully styled mannequins. This isn't just a store. It's a stage, and the film uses every inch of it. The story unfolds between after-hours dance montages, dressing room chases, and increasingly elaborate window displays that turn the storefront into a living gallery. Mannequin turns the mall from a consumer space into a fantasy space. It's not about shopping, and it's about creation, imagination, and escapism. There's also an unforgettable supporting character, Hollywood Montrose, the store's flamboyant display designer who turns every scene he's in into a fashion show with jazz hands. And let's not forget the soundtrack. Starship's Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now wasn't just a hit song. It became the emotional backbone of an entire mall-loving generation. Watching Mannequin today is like stepping into a dream version of the 80s retail world, one where love is real, magic is possible, and malls are places where anything can happen once the doors close. Before Chopping Mall gave us robots with laser eyes, the Initiation gave us something a little more grounded, but no less terrifying. A group of college students trapped overnight inside a department store being hunted by a masked killer. Released in 1984, The Initiation is a slasher film wrapped in sorority hazing rituals, family trauma, and yes, shopping mall architecture. The setup is classic. A group of girls sneak into a high-end store in a mall as part of a sorority prank, planning to spend the night there. But once the gates close and the lights dim, they quickly realize they're not alone. What makes the film stand out, especially now, is how it uses the space. The mall becomes a maze of shadows and mannequins. Escalators creak in the dark. Security mirrors reflect movement that shouldn't be there. It turns the everyday familiarity of the mall into something alien and unsettling. And let's be honest, if you've ever walked through a mall after hours, even just for a minute, you've probably felt a little of that same eeriness. Malls aren't built for silence. When the music stops, when the hum of people disappears, what's left is a strangely sterile kind of emptiness, which the Initiation uses to full effect. It's not the most famous slasher of the 80s, but it deserves a spot on this list because it took a very familiar place, the department store, and turned it into a pressure cooker. And it did it years before horror figured out that malls were the perfect place to set a nightmare. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure isn't a mall movie from start to finish, but the shopping mall sequence is so perfectly chaotic, so incredibly 80s, that it earns a place here without hesitation. The premise of the film is already wild. Two dim-witted but lovable high schoolers must pass their history class or risk breaking up their band, Wild Stalins. And to do it, they travel through time in a phone booth, collecting real historical figures along the way. Naturally, they end up with Socrates, Joan of Arc, Beethoven, Genghis Khan, Billy the Kid, and Abraham Lincoln, all in the same van. And where do they leave them while they prep their final presentation? At the mall. What follows is one of the most ridiculous and joyful sequences in any teen comedy of the era. Genghis Khan rampaging through a sporting goods store on a skateboard, Beethoven losing his mind on electric keyboards at a music shop, Joan of Arc hijacking an aerobics class, Billy the Kid and Socrates trying to flirt with mall girls like it's 388 BC. It's loud, silly, and shot in a real, bustling mall full of glass storefronts, pastel signage, and security guards in short sleeves. In other words, pure time capsule material. The mall here isn't just a location, it's a cultural collision point. You take the past, drop it into a mall in 1989, and just let things explode. And like the rest of the film, the mall scene works because it never winks at the audience. It's ridiculous, but it's sincere. And when the historical figures finally get arrested and Bill and Ted have to go bail them out, well, nothing says 80s teen adventure like going to the mall and ending up at the police station. Bill and Ted reminds us that even time travelers couldn't resist the mall, and honestly, can you blame them? First Kid, released in 1996, came at a time when the mall was still holding on as a central space in American youth culture, even if it wasn't quite the cultural epicenter it had been a few years earlier. The film follows Luke, the teenage son of the President of the United States, who lives under constant surveillance and strict rules, with little room to make choices for himself. One day when he breaks away from his security team, the first place he runs to isn't a hideout or somewhere private, it's a shopping mall. And that decision says a lot about how malls functioned for kids in the 90s. In the key sequence, Luke blends into the crowd, moves freely through stores and food courts, and, for the first time, feels like no one's watching him. There's no high-stakes chase, no major revelation, just a simple moment of quiet freedom in a public space. Something that felt rare for a kid in his position, and something that many kids, in a different way, recognized in their own lives. The mall in First Kid isn't the focus of the film, but it serves as a reminder of what malls represented at the time. Not just places to shop, but places to move, observe, disappear, and feel like you belong to something outside of school, home, or routine. For Luke, and for a generation that grew up during those years, the mall was often the first space where you could make your own decisions, wander without a schedule, and if you were lucky, be left alone. The movie treats that idea with simplicity, no big message, no sentimentality, but it captures a truth that still resonates with anyone who remembers that version of mall life. Jackie Chan's Police Story isn't usually thought of as a mall movie, but it absolutely earns its place here thanks to one of the most ambitious action sequences ever filmed inside a shopping center. Released in 1985 and set in Hong Kong, the film builds toward a final showdown that takes place almost entirely inside a multi-level mall, where glass walls, escalators, and neon signage turn into props for a full-scale demolition. What makes this sequence stand out isn't just the choreography or the danger, though both are impressive. It's how the mall itself becomes part of the action. Displays are shattered, mannequins fly across the screen, and Chan slides down a pole wrapped in electrified lights that actually burned his hands during the shoot. This isn't a mall as backdrop. It's a structure being used, broken, and redefined by the chaos of the scene. And while most mall films explore the social side of shopping culture, Police Story treats the mall as architecture, open, exposed, and perfect for spectacle. Even if you don't think of this film as part of the mall movie genre, it delivers one of the clearest cases for how the design and energy of a shopping center can be turned into pure cinematic momentum. Set in a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles, Night of the Comet follows two teenage girls who wake up to discover that almost everyone has vanished after a mysterious event. With the city suddenly silent, they do what makes the most sense to them. They go to the mall. Not to survive, but to reclaim some sense of normalcy. Inside, they try on clothes, play with makeup, blast music, and for a while, it feels like the end of the world has come with unlimited access to retail therapy. But under the surface, there's something more subtle going on. The mall, brightly lit and completely intact, feels disconnected from the world outside. The girls are playing dress-up inside a structure that used to be filled with life, but now stands as a reminder of everything that just disappeared. Unlike other films that use the mall as a social space, Night of the Comet shows us what happens when the social part is gone. What's left is the architecture, the styling, the music, and the memory of a culture that, in the film's universe, ended overnight. It's not a loud film, and the mall scenes aren't there for laughs or big moments. They're eerie, almost quiet, and that's what makes them work. The movie turns the shopping mall into a kind of monument. Not to consumerism, but to what happens when people are no longer part of the picture.